So I found myself going down another YouTube rabbit hole. I was watching some Neil deGrasse Tyson videos, and he got into it with this Ben Shapiro and Christopher Kirk character regarding the transgender community and movement. And I wanted to talk about that because it blows my mind how wrong so many people have it. I mean, holy shit, people are just clueless. Okay, so first intro. There are three categories, three words we can use to describe people in this context. And if you try to do this in front of like a Christopher Kirk or a Shapiro, they're going to stop you immediately. They're going to wave their hands in your face and they're going to say, no, 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 that's not right. That doesn't count. That's not how it works. No, 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 they're the same thing. They're not going to let you get an word in edgewise, and you have to persist. And they'll probably just walk away from you if you persist, because they're looking for easy targets. What they're doing is playing word judo. That's where you say one thing, but you mean another. So they're stating facts, but they're not actually facts. What they are, they're technically facts, but not in the context of what we mean when we say facts. What we're saying is they're drawing a conclusion that is factual based on the data points they bring up. But those data points do not support the conclusion they draw. It just sounds like it does. And when it comes to this trans stuff, which I'm no expert at, a lot of it is because, shut up, Groot. A lot of it is because, we've been brainwashing the population of the world for thousands of years. A lot of what people think they know about sex, gender, and sexuality is a complete fiction. It's biological nonsense. And it's because in order to enslave and control a population, you need to fit that population into as small a number of boxes as possible. Because the broader the mental scope of the people you're trying to enslave and control, the more difficult it is to control them. If you can confine them, compel them to fit within a very narrow field, it's much, much easier to dominate, control, brainwash, and gaslight that population. And we've been doing this for thousands of years. 90% of the world is wrong, because 90% of the world has been compelled to agree to fit themselves, to conform to this ideology under threat of death. That's not hyperbole. If you did not conform, at best they belittled you and called you nuts. At worst, they tortured, castrated, tarred and feathered, burned, drowned, and murdered you. And this is not ancient history, okay? This is recent history. We're talking one lifetime. People are still alive who know what happened. Alan Turing, one of the greatest heroes of World War II, helped develop the machine to decode the Enigma from the Nazis. When he came out as gay, they castrated him. Okay? So we're not talking about 200, 300, 400 years ago. We're talking, 60 years ago. This is recent history. This still goes on. The reason this trans stuff is all popular today is because today is one of those rare periods of time where you are not under immediate threat of death if you refuse to conform. And so people are freer to express themselves, and so they are. So, 3 words. And Kirk and Shapiro will reject these 3 words, and that's their problem. You need to fight them. Sex, gender, sexuality. Sex and sexuality are related. You'll see why in a moment. But sex and gender have nothing to do with each other. In fact, gender, as you probably think you know it, is a complete fiction. It's a fabrication. It doesn't exist in nature as a natural thing. We created it and imposed it under threat of death on the population and said, you will conform to these 2 or you die. And the reason they will not allow you to separate sex and gender is because the moment you do, their entire argument falls apart. So, basic definition. Sex is hardware. That's it. Hardware. Okay? Men have a sausage. Women have a bun. Sausage fits in the bun. Okay? Now, Gender is software. Gender is what's in here. So think this is basically a PC. This is a computer. What you have inside your skull is literally a computer. It even has the basics of computer. You have a CMOS. That's your pre-boot operating system. That's your brainstem. That's what allows the rest of you to boot up. That's what runs the basic background operations of the hardware. Controls your heart, controls your breathing, etc. And then your main PC, your main CPU is your brain. You are the software encoded into that PC. Right? Your brain sits inside of a body, a vessel. Your body is your vessel. What's you is what's in here, and that's software. Okay. Sexuality is your sexual preference. That's all that is. Do you prefer men? Do you prefer women? Do you prefer neither? Do you prefer both? A mix? That's all that is. That's just your sexual and romantic preferences. That's all sexuality is. And neither sex nor sexuality have anything to do with gender. The connection that we see between gender and sex, men are male, women are female, that's sex and gender. That's an artificial construct that doesn't exist in nature. If you were to have an alien family who has no genders whatsoever and have them raise human children with no knowledge about how human children are supposed to be raised, they would be neither male nor female. They would find some kind of point on the spectrum that works with their hormones, their biochemistry, their software, their upbringing, their environment, and their desires. It's a mix of all those things. That's what forms your expression. We aim to limit that expression because we want to control people. I love how people say, I will not conform to your pronouns, but you're forcing them to conform to your pronouns. So because you're the majority, it's okay if you force them to conform, but they're the minority, so it's not okay for them to ask you to conform. You see the hypocrisy? Well, you don't, because you think you're right. You think you're the majority. Okay, so I'm going to prove you wrong. Let's start with sex. How many sexes does the human species have? This chair's hurting my butt. How many sexes does the human species have? This is going to surprise a lot of people. You see, the dogma of your religion and your body politic is going to tell you, and it's going to beat it into your brain over and over again. God created Adam and Eve. There's a man and a woman, and men are male and women are female, and that's the way God made it. Well, no, that's not the way God made it. First of all, I think God's a fictional deity, but that's a different subject altogether. I personally think people who need religion are weak, and people who need gods are immature and uneducated. That's just my opinion. You could be uneducated in different ways. You could be phenomenal at mathematics and uneducated in other ways. That doesn't mean you're a dummy. I don't think 90% of the world is dumb. I think 90% of the world is brainwashed and gaslit by thousands of years of threats of death if you don't conform. It's a pretty good way to get most of the world to conform. What's the difference between this religion and that religion? This ruler runs this religion. This ruler doesn't want to be under this ruler. So you have two rulers that fight. This ruler makes religion because religion is a fantastic way of controlling people. Why do you think Christianity has so many elements of other religions in it from history? Because we learn. As we move along from one religion to the next, from one set of deities to the next. For example, the pantheon of deities in the Greek mythology, that didn't work. That created too broad a mindset in people. And the broader the mindset of your population, the more difficult it is to control them. So we don't want that. We want to compel you to conform to a very narrow field of view, a very narrow definition, because the more narrow we can force you to conform to, the easier it is to manipulate and control you. So we had to get rid of multiple gods. That's why most religions switched to singular gods. Okay, was that theistic? There's a word for one god. I don't remember what it is. You can look it up. But that's what religion is. Religion is there to control people, to control populations, to enslave populations, to bend them to your will and make them do what you want. That's why we have multiple religions, because we have multiple people who want to be rulers. Why do these religions have all similar factors and histories and components? Because we learn. My hair will not stay put. Because we learn from history. We learn that this being a part of your religion works better than this being a part of your religion. So each time we reinvent a religion, we get better and better at making it more and more perfect to control more and more people. Christianity, Islam, and the whatever other. Well, now it's mostly variations of Christianity, I guess. I'm not an expert on religion, but this is the fine tuning that's going on. Why do we have so many branches of Christianity? Different rulers. I want to be ruler, not you, and so I create my own religion so that I can rule my people. And now those religions fight to be rulers. So, sex is hardware. Your hardware cannot be changed. At least we can partially change it. We have surgeries, but that's mostly superficial. We don't yet have the technology to change our hardware in any meaningful way. To some extent, you can. They can do surgical things. They can do hormone therapies and stuff like that, but it's still incomplete. And that's not a limitation on what is possible. That's a limitation on our technology. But for now, for the purpose of this discussion, your sex, your hardware is fixed. You can't change that. For the context of this discussion, we're going to accept that it cannot be changed. Gender, however, is software. And software is intrinsically changeable. I mean, one of the things that defines us as a people, as Homo sapiens, as sapient beings, as sentient beings, as self-aware, intelligent, thinking creatures, what differentiates us from, the fly that I just killed and people is that our ability to edit our software. That's what it comes down to. We can change our software. I can choose to ignore my instincts that tell me to kill that black person because they're different. I can choose to ignore that instinct and recognize they're just a different kind of person. That's a choice we make. I can choose to not fight you and work together with you. Again, this is things that we can do that you normally can't do. I don't have to run from the cold. I can build a warmer house, make warmer clothing. This is what separates us from normal standard animals who are simply input-output. If this, then that. If this happens, do this. I can go, if this happens, do this. No. Scrub that. Erase that, and let's do this instead. I can choose to do that. I can alter my software. How well I can alter it? Well, that depends on the person. It depends on the environment. It depends on the upbringing. There's a lot of factors involved. You can't ignore your environment and your upbringing and your culture and your hormones. That's going to influence that. But it's not an absolute. We have the ability to influence our own software. That's what gender is. Now, how many sexes does the human species have? Man and woman. Adam and Eve. No, that's a fiction. And here's Christopher Kirk waving his hands in your face. No. That's an exception. That's an error. That's a blah 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 blah. Shut the fuck up. The human species has 4 sexes. That's going to be a shocker to a lot of you. The human species has 4 sexes. Male, female, both, and neither. Some words that we can use to define these two: hermaphrodite and eunuch. So you could argue male, female, hermaphrodite, eunuch. Male has a sausage. Female has the bun that accepts the sausage. Okay? Your hermaphrodite has both, the sausage and the bun. And your eunuch has neither. No sausage, no bun. These people exist. They're not theoretical. They're not extraordinarily rare, like 1 to billion. There's an actual percentage. These people actually exist in the world. Eunuchs are a bit more rare, but they are real. Hermaphrodites are a bit more common than people think. Usually they are mutilated at birth to conform to one or the other, usually male, because we are a misogynistic society, so we are male-dominated. You don't have to like it to accept that that's fact. But the reality is, biologically, they're not male or female. They're both. So, if having a penis by definition makes you male gender, and having a vagina by definition makes you female gender, what gender is the person who has both? Oh, suddenly that whole argument starts to go, Oh, and it gets worse. What about the eunuch? The eunuch, well, which gender are they? They don't got the male genitalia or the female genitalia. I believe medically they call them ambiguous genitalia because we don't really have a word for it. But eunuch is the closest word we have. Technically, eunuch is a prepubescent male that's been castrated. The Greeks did this because prepubescent, we were still female. We were feminine. We were still more girly. We were more similar to girls. And so they would do it prepubescent because they wanted pretty boys because they were pretty kinky, weird motherfuckers. But it's close enough a word that we can use to describe that fourth sex. So now you can look this up. You don't have to take my word for it. This is objective, verified, irrefutable, non-discussable, inarguable fact. The human species has four sexes. So even if you are going to believe in that fairy tale deity in the sky, that God that doesn't exist, that man created in order to enslave you, even if you're going to choose to believe that, then you have to believe that God made four sexes because four sexes exist. Okay? If someone's a variation between the two, they're just going to end up on that spectrum of one or the other. We're just going to catalog them. But ultimately, there's four basic sexes, not two. And the fact that there's four sexes takes this whole concept of male-female gender and blows it right out of the water. So where did male and female gender come from? We created it. Somebody who was in charge, who was in power in the past, decided men should behave like this, women should behave like this, and we're going to enforce this under penalty of death. If you do not conform to being male, if you are a man, and being female, if you are a woman, we will kill you. And if you are a powerful figure, like Galileo or Alan Turing or somebody like that, we will imprison you, we will torture you, we will castrate you, we'll make an example of you, we will force you to submit, we'll force you to admit that I am one or the other. And this is what we did for thousands of years. And you wonder why everybody conforms to it. It's not because it's right, it's because nobody wants to die. That's why. The reality is there are no genders. Genders are not a thing. There's no such thing as male gender or female gender. Those are fabrications, creations of mankind. The reality is gender is expression. It is a category that we fabricated out of thin air, and naturally, genders would be a spectrum. This is why you could argue it's infinite. The reality is that breaks down. At some point, it becomes diminishing returns to try to differentiate finer than the point you're at. You're going to fall into a category at some point. They like to argue, oh, so you think there could be infinite genders because that makes it sound preposterous, when it's not. That's just the nature of a spectrum. You can divide our sex into four because there are four basic sexes. I'm not aware of a fifth. Maybe there is. I'm not aware of it, though. As far as I can tell, there's only four. So that's, limited. That's finite. But gender is not four finite things. Gender is a spectrum, and you're somewhere on there. Okay? From here to here. Call this extreme male. Call this extreme female. You're somewhere on the spectrum. You are. I am. Everybody else is. I think of myself as a man, but am I that manly, macho, masculine, extreme male? No, I'm somewhere over here. All right? If you're a woman, are you that ultra femme, queen, princess, female? No, you're probably somewhere over here. All right? And there are other people who say, well, I'm somewhere here. Or people who have this sexual hardware, they want to be over here. Or this sexual hardware, and they want to be over here. Because you can choose your gender. To some extent, you can choose your method of expression. It's going to be influenced by your hormones. You're going to be a bit more masculine if you have more testosterone. You're going to be a bit more feminine if you have more estrogen. If you were raised as a man, you're going to be a bit more masculine. If you were raised as a woman, you're going to be a bit more feminine. There's also intrinsic coding in our DNA, in our software that's built in. We have a limited ability to alter. Some of us, it's easier to alter. Some of us, not so easy to alter, and we're pretty fixed. This is going to be different from person to person. That's all it is. And they don't want this because this rebukes their entire control scheme. The purpose of religion is to compel and force indoctrination of everybody else into your religion. That's why it starts with, you shall believe in no God but me, and you go to hell if you don't believe in me. That's the whole point. To compel, to force you to be indoctrinated and to conform to their selected system. If you were raised in the Middle East, you would not believe in God. You would not be Christian. You'd be Muslim. If you were raised in India, you'd probably be Buddhist or whatever religion they have there. Your religion is literally defined by what you were taught. Some people can change their software. Remember I said you could change your software. And a person could later decide, I don't want to be Muslim, I want to be Christian. Or I don't want to be Christian, I want to be Muslim. You can do that. And you do it the same way you change your gender. You just choose to. You alter your software. That's it. Now, that aside, there are some things that should not be determined by gender. It should be determined by sex. And most people intrinsically understand this. A man, sex, not gender, should not be competing in women's sports, at least sports that are physical in nature. Men are superior to women. This is a fact. It's not an insult. It's not derogatory. It's not a superiority thing. It's not a misogyny thing. It's a fact. On average, men are 10% larger, 10% denser, and 10% stronger than women. You cannot overcome this. If you take the best women's sports team against the worst men's sports team on a professional level, the men's sports team is going to destroy them every single time. Not just beat them, not just win, destroy them. Like, crush them. Like, you're going to cringe at how badly they're going to lose. Doesn't matter how much they train, doesn't matter how much talent they have. Remember, we're talking professional level here, not average Joe. Okay? It just doesn't matter what they do. It's like going to it's like trying to go to a drag race with a NASCAR. You can have the best goddamn NASCAR in the world. You're going to get your ass handed to you every goddamn time. Or go to a drag race with a monster truck. You're done. You can't even swerve and run over the drag car. Because that drag car is going to leave that starting line so goddamn fast that it'll be gone before you finish turning the wheel of your monster truck. You can't win. And that's why those kind of sports have separations. A classic example of this is wrestling. I did varsity wrestling and varsity football in high school. I liked football because of the aggression. It allowed me to vent. And I liked wrestling because it was intellectual. It was more hands-on. With football, it's limited to what I can do because I only have one eye. This eye doesn't work. So no depth perception. And that also meant, like in wrestling, I tended to go down pretty fast and get on the mat. Because, doing a leg reach to try to peel a guy off his feet is just not going to work for me. I miss half the time because I can't judge the distance. I have no depth perception. But once he puts his hands on me, I know exactly where he is. Once he's on my back or on my side, I know precisely where he is. And now my depth perception is irrelevant. I can close my eyes. But in wrestling, we have weight classes. And there's a reason we have weight classes. You could take, if you were to put me, a 185-pound wrestler, against a 120-pound wrestler, I could be a complete green newbie, and that guy could be a state champion. I'm going to fuck his day up every goddamn time. Even if I let him take whatever position he wants, all I have to do is twitch and overpower him. I mean, there's nothing a 120-pound person can do in wrestling, in general, on average, against a 185-pound wrestler. The mismatch in strength, density, and mass is so great, there's nothing they can do. The same thing applies in sports. And you should also apply the same thing to any place where you have privacy concerns. Okay? If you want to identify as a woman, there's nothing wrong with that. Identify as a woman. I mean, clothes don't have genders. We associate genders to them. We apply gender associations to clothes. Clothes don't have genders. Skirts were invented for men. When skirts were invented, only men were allowed to wear them. Women weren't even allowed to wear clothes. Stockings, invented for men. High-heeled shoes, invented for men. Makeup, invented for men. It later went out of fashion with men and got adopted by women. And that's because we are a misogynistic society. We are a society that believes that men are superior and women are inferior. For most of our history, we believe women were property. They weren't even people. That's how pathetic our societies were for a long time. This fucking hair keeps getting in my face. Need a haircut again. This is cultural. This is something we're taught, that this person who wants to control and enslave you is ordering you to believe. And we do that with the body politic. That's our social and cultural structures and our religions. And that's how we control people. That's how we do that. They're going to dispute this by saying, well, sex and gender are the same thing. Okay, so what gender is a hermaphrodite? We'll just pretend they don't exist. How convenient. The one data point that completely dismantles your entire argument. You're just going to pretend that doesn't exist. That's what people who are snake oil salesmen, who like to play word judo, and who know that 90% of the population agrees with them, that's what they do. That's what those kind of people do. They're wrong, but they sound right. He'll say, well, you want men and women's sports. No, I want a man to be able to express as feminine if he wants to. But if he's got a dick and balls, he goes in the men's bathroom. or should we change that? There's one way to eliminate that problem. Sausage bathroom, bun bathroom. If you got a sausage, you go in the sausage bathroom. Doesn't matter what your gender is. If you got a sausage, you go in the sausage bathroom. If you got a bun, you go in the bun bathroom. Problem solved. You see, the problem is we use the same word for both things. We use men and male to refer to the sex, and we use men and male to refer to the gender. And so people get confused. And people like Kirk and Shapiro abuse that to trick you. They'll say they're talking about gender, but they're actually talking about sex. But they'll say they're talking about gender. You'll try to call them out on it. They'll literally watch their videos. They'll hand wave, dismiss you, and go back to talking about sex using gender terms. That's what they do. They play word judo. And these people who apparently lose to them, leftists get owned. No, they're just losing to a snake oil salesman who's very good at word judo. It's like trying to argue with a cop. You're going to lose every time. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care what your IQ is. You argue with a cop, you lose. Because that cop's got 20 or 30 years experience at fucking with and manipulating everything that comes out of your mouth to bend it to be what he wants it to be. To trick you into saying what he wants you to say the way he wants you to say it. That's why we have trained martial artists to protect ourselves against those evil villain martial artists. They're called lawyers. Okay? That's why we have lawyers. Because his word judo doesn't work on the lawyer. Even if he tricks the lawyer into saying something, because the lawyer's not the suspect, it doesn't have the same effect. The lawyer can say, no, that's not the way it is. This is the way it is. Well, if you said that, you'd look guilty. If the lawyer says that, he knows the law. See the difference? So you can't argue with a cop because you cannot overcome that experience. And it's the same thing here. Arguing with somebody like Shapiro or Kirk is difficult because they have decades of experience at bullshitting people, at using data points that sound factual to cause you to infer a conclusion that's not supported by those data points. You say, "Oh, I can identify as a moose." A moose is a thing. A moose is hardware. That's sex. You can't change your hardware. We're talking about gender. So I can identify as a moose. A moose isn't a gender, you fucking twat. A moose is a different species. It's a creature. It doesn't even have a gender. It wouldn't know what gender was if you spent 1,000 years trying to explain it to it. Right? See, that's what they do. You're talking about gender, and they switch to sex. They switch to hardware. And it sounds like they're making sense. Oh, I can be a fox. I can be a cat. I can be a moose. I can identify as black. I can identify as 60 if I'm 30. Those are hardware things. We're not talking about hardware. We're talking about software. You can't change your hardware. You can't make yourself 60 unless you're actually 60. You can't make yourself a moose unless you're actually a moose. Hey, who knows? In 1,000 years, maybe we'll be able to download your brain into the body of a moose and you can be a moose if you want. Maybe we'll download your brain to a computer and stick you as an AI core inside an M1 Abrams tank and you can be an M1 Abrams tank. Or you can be an A10 Warthog and go, brrr. Okay? Maybe in 1,000 years, we'll be able to do that. Right now, you can't. Right now, you're a human and you're either male, female, hermaphrodite, or eunuch. Those are your 4 choices. That's it. For hardware, those are your choices. You don't get a 5th option, at least not that I'm aware of. There's no 5th option. You're one of those 4 things. And you're a homo sapien. You're a human. You can't be a moose. You can't be a tank. You can't be a cat. That's not what transgender people are talking about. They're talking about gender, which is software. We're not talking about hardware, okay? We're talking about software. But these people won't let you. They're going to try to steer the conversation back to the idea that sex and gender are the same thing, and that's when they're going to bring in their, well, I can identify as a moose example, which is total bullshit. So again, they're correct. You can't just identify as a moose. It's preposterous, but that's not what that person's saying. That's how the word judo works. That's how the snake oil salesman works. Okay? That's how they make you look dumb, make you look like you lost if you're not aware of what they're doing and how to defend against it. That's when you pull out your spatula and you smack Shapiro in the forehead and go, hey, asshole, I said gender, not hardware. I can identify as 60. Smack. That's hardware. I can identify as a cat. Smack. That's hardware. We're talking software. I can identify as a tank. Smack. That's hardware. We're talking software. I want to keep smacking you until you recognize we're talking about the software. That's what you have to do. It's the only way you can fight those people. And everybody has to do that. And he'll shut you down. And he'll move on to the next person because he knows he can't win. And everybody has to do that. Shut him down. Force him to acknowledge that the human species has 4 sexes. And the very existence of that 3rd sex destroys his entire argument. Because again, I'll come back to the same question. You have a hermaphrodite who is equally male and female and has both sets of genitalia. What gender are they? Is it a choice? Well, who chooses? Does the doctor choose? Does the parents choose? When does the person who actually has to live like that for 80 years get a choice? When do they get a say? They're the ones who've got to live with it, not you. Why do people care? Well, because this religious indoctrination is used to control you. It's used to enslave the entire population. That's why they care. That's why they care about something that has no effect on them. That's why you'll have stupid people saying, I am not going to conform to your pronouns. But you can force us to conform to your pronouns if he or she. That's supported by God and biology. No, there's 4 sexes. So hermaphrodite, are they male or female? What gender are they? Suddenly you have to acknowledge it's either a choice or it's taught. Either which way, you break the line of thinking that gender is intrinsic to sex. It's not. That's it. If you have any questions, ask down below.